Welcome to Vajrayana, and in the middle of a lake here we have Vajrayana. We'll begin with the section from Journey Without Goal, which is the concluding section of the liturgy from Jamgun Kongtrul, Crying to the Gurus from Afar. And as always, kindly generate the motivation of bodhicitta in regards to this study. So, death is certain to come, but I am unable to take this to heart. The holy Dharma truly benefits, but I am unable to practice it properly. Karma and its result are certainly true, but I do not properly discriminate what to accept and reject. Mindfulness and awareness are certainly necessary, but not stabilizing them. I am swept away by distractions. Guru, think of me. Look upon me quickly with compassion. Grant your blessings so that I maintain undistracted mindfulness. So at this point, we're revisiting the foundations of the path, which is the reflection on impermanence. So if we look before, what we've actually covered in terms of this last section of the devotional chart, we've actually gone through the path in the sense of that which leads to recognizing our own mind as the intrinsically abiding Dharmakaya. We're continually referring back to our shortcomings. And this is a very helpful place to come back to, because this is really where liberation lies. We're never going to be able to sweep our shortcomings under the carpet and then sort of place something that looks nice on top of it. The qualities of the path is something that stands apart from the dirt under the carpet. The entire approach really of the Buddha Dharma is that since we intrinsically possess this purity, these fleeting temporary obscurations, they have no real power over us. But the moment that we choose to ignore them, then they begin to have some traction. The moment we take them out and look at them, we actually discover liberation. We discover that they have no power. And it's in this recognition of our shortcomings actually that we gain true confidence in seeing that they have no real power over us. So we're continually coming back to being very comfortable with exposing our shortcomings. And with the confidence on the basis of invoking the lineage and undertaking the practices of the path, there is the confidence in our abiding innate disposition. And yet we could look at the paradox that despite having that insight, we nevertheless perpetuate very ordinary habitual patterns, and they exercise incredible control over us. So although we do realize our mind intrinsically is primordially pure, we also find ourselves entangled in some very destructive patterns. And this is universal across the condition of samsara, but particularly us then who are practitioners. We need to again and again revisit the most fundamental themes, really. And that is the themes of things like recollecting death and seeing how incredible it is. And I know it for myself. And my perfect teacher, Chögyam Rinpoche, also very much identifying with the neurosis that most of us are prone to, also will, you could say, mimic or express his own ability to remember impermanence. It's incredible how we don't understand that we're going to die, and how, in fact, everything else is so really secondary to that project, that we all horrified of death, and yet the fact that we're going to die seems to be remarkably distant a lot of the time. And so we have what it takes, we have the Holy Dharma, and yet we find ourselves not applying it. We know that karma and its results is something that is verifiably true, and yet we perpetuate patterns that are not very helpful. And as far as our meditation goes, that which really should set us free, that which actually is the lubricant that enables us to work with the mind, that which sustains sanity, we don't stabilize it. And so we are caught by superficial, unnecessary considerations. We're distracted. So recognizing all these faults is not something that's going to define us as what we are, but they define what it is that prevents us from being what we truly are. And that's why we invoke the teacher who embodies what we truly are, what we truly would want. And so we supplicate the Guru and aspire or implore the teacher that the teacher's blessing may enter our mind, that we may maintain sanity, that we may find rest in sanity. And we do this through undistracted mindfulness. Mindfulness here not as a tight project of sustaining focus, but rather relaxing into what is not mindless, and simply just embracing the fullness of experience. So this is our aspiration. And then going to the text that we're presently studying, which is Sacred Outlook, the Sacred Outlook, the practice of Vajrayana. Now, I was just looking, I wanted to recap a little bit, and in doing so, I just came across almost like my prayers were answered. I thought, let's look at something that actually really recaps what we've been looking at here. And I just came across two paragraphs that I'm going to read to you that really brings the point of what we're doing here home. I'd like to say, once again, this article is remarkable in presenting Vajrayana. As far as I'm concerned, I haven't come across anywhere where you, in such a short space, actually sum up the key points that would enable someone to understand what is Vajrayana about. And one of the important points really that's being taught here is really how this relates to the general Buddhist vehicles, the Four Noble Truths and so on, the foundations of the path. But specifically then, proceeding to the heart of the matter here in terms of how we're applying this. And in today's study, we're going to look very much on how this has been passed down as a practical as an actual lineage of practical application that comes down to us here in the present day. Then just before that, I'd like to just sum up really the important points really of this practical application. And as all Vajrayana is premised on seeing the pure nature that we naturally possess. And this nature is introduced not as something that would be understood through book learning or through data, but very much on the basis of genuine experience of meeting the wisdom of the teacher and the practice of being open to and have the humility and the interest to be sensitive to the qualities of the teacher. And of course, this is where we need to have a teacher, need to have that very, from our side, very personal relationship. We might think of it in terms of the teacher not knowing us or the teacher being far away, but if we really have a sense of the teacher's presence in our life as significant, then it doesn't really matter whether or not the teacher is you can say living in our neighborhood, or whether the teacher is someone that we just occasionally have a glimpse of. The teacher becomes a very real presence in our life. So this being key to the Vajrayana, the Vajrayana preliminaries are very much focused on bringing about this condition and this relationship with the teacher. This is then the culmination of the Ngundo and of the preliminary practices, and it's called the Guru Yoga. So Trungpa here says in an earlier section that we already have studied, but I just wanted to go over it again. He says, in the Guru Yoga, the practitioner begins to realize the non-dual nature of devotion. There is no separation between the lineage and oneself, and in fact, the Vajra being of the Guru is a reflection of one's own innate nature. In this way, the practice of Ngundo, culminating in Guru Yoga, helps to overcome theistic notions about the teacher or about Vajrayana itself. So the teacher is not seen as an external person, but rather the manifestation of one's innate nature. And that encounter with the teacher, melting away one's ordinary conceptual references, also melts away these attempts at holding on to oneself, holding on to concepts, pigeonholing the world, and so forth. All of these, what we call extremes, that really the Buddhist, what we could call middle way critique, enables us to see through. Enables us to see through the hoax of these deceptive reference points of our insecurity. And these reference points, these you could say deluding or deluded reference points, these are what we call extremes, and what Trungpa also refers to as theistic notions, where in this case here, we might think of the teacher again as somebody who's out there that's going to save the day for us, or somebody who can look after us. And that again is not the intention of the teacher. The teacher is someone who wishes to introduce us to our own autonomy, if you like, to our own wisdom. And so eventually the student has to recognize what the teacher is pointing to, but can do this on the basis of the openness to the teacher. And that's where the Guru Yoga then enables us to overcome these deluded reference points, or what we call theistic notions about the teacher, about an external savior, about even the path. So Trungpa Rinpoche continues, one realizes that the lineage is not an entity outside of oneself. One is not worshipping the teacher or his ancestors as gods. Rather, one is connecting with Vajra sanity, which is so powerful because of its non-existence, its utter egolessness. So it's on the basis of this relationship then that we discover what we already possess. And the lineage is seen as something that where we share. We have a shared heritage with the teacher, but not as ancestors, but more in terms of abiding as innately, you could say, united with our own sanity, our own Buddha nature. But this needs to be understood not as something that can be grasped, but rather the very absence of grasping is the place where this heritage becomes manifest. So I'm going to take the next one too, because that's very much going to situate us where we are. When we begin to mix our minds with the energy of the lineage, we're not doing so in order to protect ourselves from the world. In fact, devotion brings us closer to our experience, to our world. As a result of the practice of Nindra, we feel a greater sense of warmth and gentleness in ourselves. Because of that, we can relax and take a fresh look at the phenomenal world. We find that life can be easy, natural process. Because there's no need to struggle, we start to experience goodness everywhere. We experience a tremendous sense of freedom and sacredness in everything. So I'm going to here jump to the main part, or back to where we are. But just to say that here, while the previous section really identifies the role of the teacher, this paragraph here really, you could say, spells out or introduces the spirit of the Vajrayana main practice. That this is about having a fresh experience, with the phenomenal world. So this is not just something delightful, but it's something that's unconditional. It is on the basis of egolessness. There is this experience of the brilliance of the world and the sacred quality that is basic to ourselves and in fact, our entire experience of the phenomenal world. So that's where we're introduced to then Vajrayana as that which embodies this sacred quality that is innate to us. So that's why we've looked at the 5 Buddha families, we've looked at the Abhisheka, and now we're looking at the lineage, which then, in the case of Trungpa Rinpoche, who was transmitting this in North America, is then the Karma Kagyu tradition that he was a holder of. Actually, what strictly speaking is known as the Surmang Kagyu, even though the Surmang is of course part of the Kagyu tradition. It is also to some extent a lineage in itself, and the Surmang lineage is actually famous for the approach that we also saw in Trungpa Rinpoche's teaching, which is the practice of Kagyu and Nyingma lineages combined. But here specifically then, talking about the practice of Vajrayana, this is then what comes down from from Tilopa and Naropa. So then we're looking at the practice itself, and we've looked a little bit about how this came about, how Tilopa received this, how it was transmitted down through the lineage, the Kagyu lineage, the Karma Kagyu lineage, and then the third Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje, is then the one who wrote the basis for the Vajrayana sadhana. So this, so here then, Trungpa Rinpoche continues. The first Trungpa was a student of the Siddha Trungma Se in the 15th century, who was a close disciple of the 5th Karmapa, Teshin Shekpa. When Naropa transmitted the teachings of Vajrayana to Mapa, he told him that these teachings should be kept as a transmission from one teacher to one student for 13 generations, and then they could be propagated to others. This transmission is called Chikyu, the single lineage or single thread transmission. Because of this, the Kagyu lineage is frequently called the hearing lineage. Trungma Se received the complete teachings on Vajrayana, Chakrasambhara, and the 4-armed Mahakala, and these became a special transmission that he was to hold. Since Trungma Se belonged to the 13th generation, he became the first guru to transmit this particular lineage of Mahamudra teaching to more than a single Dharma successor. And in fact, he taught it widely. The first Trungpa, Kunga Gyaltsen, was one of Trungma Se's disciples who received this transmission. As the 11th Trungpa Tuku, I received the Vajrayana transmission from Rilpe Dorje, the regent abbot of Surmang and one of my main tutors. Since 1970, when I arrived in America, I had been working to plant the Buddha Dharma, and particularly the Vajrayana teachings in American soil. Beginning in 1977 and every year since then, those are my students who have completed the preliminary Vajrayana practices, as well as extensive training in the basic meditative disciplines, have received the Abhisheka of Vajrayogini. As of 1980, there are more than 300 Vajrayogini sadhakas, practitioners of the sadhana, in our community, and there are also many Western students studying with other Tibetan teachers and practicing various Vajrayana sadhanas. So the Vajrayogini Abhisheka and the sadhana are not purely part of Tibetan history. They have a place in the history of Buddhism in America as well. And I think what Trungpa Rinpoche here is talking about is something that is commonly known. I would like to highlight how Trungpa Rinpoche's approach was very much one of very thorough introduction to the theory, teaching extensively, and teaching in a way that connected with the student's own vocabulary, understanding, and actually touching on, you'd say, really the student's sophisticated understanding, not buying into just something that sounds lovely and enticing, but very much heightening the student's sophistication in the sense of developing a language of critical thinking, of skepticism, and on that then really establishing deep trust in the nature of the path, and also creating conditions for really rejoicing in the brilliance of the path, not just seeing the path as a slog that you had to go through choicelessly because there is suffering, but really highlighting the brilliant and skill, the brilliance and the skill of the path, and really enabling students to deeply rejoice in this vision. And that's why Trungpa Rinpoche then, in the theory, then presented the three yanas, the foundations of the Hinayana, the vastness, magnanimity of the Mahayana, and the courage and fearlessness of the Vajrayana resultant approach. And he did so with a lot of different workshops and teachings and so forth, seminars, and also at the same time not allowing students to slink away from practice, making sure that the students actually did engage in meditation practice, because of course students would be thrilled to partake in the teachings, but more reluctant to actually work with themselves. And Trungpa Rinpoche made sure that all the structures were there so that students really could gain proper meditation experience without all sorts of ritual distractions, and so that the students actually did years of sitting before they encountered the Vajrayana teachings. And also in that context, made sure that the students went through what he called seminar, where before they would begin Vajrayana practice, then they had 3 months of teaching and practice, study and practice, where they really where they were exposed to really the essentials of the Vajrayana path. So then, in terms of then passing this on, then it makes a lot of sense to explain the actual Abhisheka, where the students are actually granted access into the world that we've talked about here, this world of the Vajra world with its freedom and sacredness. And that's where we have the notion of Abhisheka, or empowerment. So Trungpa Rinpoche says the Abhisheka of Vajrayogini belongs to the highest of the 4 orders of Tantra, Anuttara Tantra. So the 4 orders are Kriya, Upa, and Yoga, what we call the outer Tantras, and then we have the inner Tantras, the highest Tantras, which is then the Anuttara Tantra. Trungpa Rinpoche says, Anuttara means highest, unsurpassed or unequaled. Anuttara Tantra can be subdivided into 3 parts: mother, father and non-dual. So we talk about mother tantra, father tantra, non-dual tantra. The Kammakaju lineage particularly emphasizes the teaching of the mother tantra, to which Vajrayana belongs. Mother tantra stresses devotion as the starting point for Vajrayana practice. Therefore, the key point in receiving the Abhisheka is to have one-pointed devotion to the teacher. By receiving Abhisheka, one is introduced to the freedom of the Vajra world. In the Abhisheka, the Vajra master manifests as the essence of this freedom, which is the essence of Vajrayogini. He therefore represents the Yidam as well as the teacher in human form. Thus, when one receives Abhisheka, it is essential to understand that the Yidam and the Guru are not separate. So we've looked at earlier how devotion is essential to actually gauge and be sensitive to the enlightenment of the teacher, and it's in that place then of the student's devotion, the student's actual deep degree of openness, and not just being intelligently open, but really with a complete sense of surrender, actually being touched by the teacher's qualities. And that's where the teacher can communicate something that goes beyond the ordinary habitual patterns, the ordinary confusion, and something can be transmitted. So that's really where the teacher can show something that is otherwise not that obvious to be experienced. And this is introducing the quality of enlightenment in the form of deity. So of course, enlightenment we could understand as the absence of confusion, the absence of freedom from conceptual constructs, and all of these, you could say, the actual nature of shunyata. But in the Vajrayana, even more than shunyata is the experience of luminosity of the experiencer, the wisdom that is experienced within the subjective dimension of the practitioner, and that's where engaging that awakened quality as it exists in terms of living experience, it's done so on the basis of deity. And deity then is what enables one to connect to the enlightenment as it exists in the physical dimension of the body, in terms of the energy of the speech, and of course the abiding reality of the cognizance, the mind. So that's where the teacher is the student's enlightenment, is the teacher is the one that represents the personal deity, or the yoga, or the commitment that the student is taking upon him or herself, and that's where the teacher is the student's personal deity. So that's where, as the student receives this, the student sees the teacher as this deity, as Vajrayogini. So Trungpa says, in the tradition of Anuttara Tantra, the student receives a fourfold Abhisheka. The entire ceremony is called an Abhisheka, and each one of the four parts is also called an Abhisheka, because each is a particular empowerment. The four Abhishekas are all connected with experiencing the phenomenal world as a sacred mandala. So this whole ceremony of empowerment, Abhisheka, or as we saw last time, anointing, is in its essence has four parts, but particularly the first, the vase empowerment, is more elaborate and has a lot of subsections. But all of these are really about not just presenting a philosophical view of how we could understand reality in a greater way, but actually entering this in terms of experience. And that's where Abhisheka is much more than just providing a context of path and a sense of something that needs to be approached and thought about and so on. It's actually the stepping into the territory. So before receiving the first Abhisheka, the students reaffirms the refuge and bodhisattva vows. At this point, the attitude of the student must be one of loving kindness for all beings with a sincere desire to benefit others. The student then takes a vow called the Samaya vow, which binds the teacher, the student, and the yidam together. So that's where sometimes we think that we need to first have a particular refuge, then a bodhisattva vow, and so on. But strictly speaking, if we receive an empowerment, then all of these actually are part of the Abhisheka. So at least my teachers would sometimes say, that if somebody showed up to an empowerment, and this of course is in a more informal setting, as you would have it in the context of Tibetan Buddhism as it's practiced in India and Nepal. If somebody showed up, you couldn't actually say, well, they can't attend because they haven't received refuge or bodhisattva vows. Well, actually, that's even that's okay, because you actually receive that as part of empowerment. At the same time, practically speaking, yes, somebody who receives Abhisheka necessarily should have gone through the foundations, particularly of study and practice. But that then being in place, then there should also ideally then be the foundations of the path, which is the renunciation, the loving kindness, and the greatness of the Mahayana should already be there. The foundations of what we call bodhicitta. And that's then where the student receives then the samaya, the commitment to the teacher. And Trungpa says, as part of this oath, the student vows that he or she will not reveal his or her Vajrayana experience to others who are not included in the mandala of Vajragini. So of course, at this point, this is something very personal, and it's not something that one sits around and talks about. Because the moment that you sit around and talk about the path or what it's like to practice and so on, when it's externalizing it, then it just becomes another experience. There's not really a sense of identifying with the path if you're sitting talking about what it's like to practice and this, that. Then it really just becomes another something external to oneself. So that's where Vajrayana experience is, where there's no longer any separation between oneself and the teacher and the deity. So that's sacred. That is something that goes right to the core of one's actual being. So that's something where there's no longer a sort of a sense of separation between oneself and the path. So this is the style then of the discipline of the Vajrayana. So as a gesture of that, the student drinks something, because this, of course, this is something that is then ingested, that becomes part of us. Trungpa says the student then drinks what is known as the Samaya oath water from a conch shell on the shrine to seal this vow. It is said that if the student violates this oath, the water will become molten iron. It will burn the student from within, and he will or she will die on the spot. On the other hand, if the student keeps his or her vow and discipline, the oath water will act to propagate the student's sanity and experience of the glory, brilliance, and dignity of the Vajra world. The notion of Samaya will be discussed in greater detail after discussions of the Abhisheka itself. So then Trungpa says, after taking the Samaya oath, the student receives the first Abhisheka, the Abhisheka of the vase, Kalasha Abhisheka, and also known as the water Abhisheka. Symbolically, the Abhisheka of the vase is the coronation of the student as a prince or princess, would-be king or queen of the mandala. It signifies the student's graduation from the ordinary world into the world of continuity, the tantric world. Now, of course, the entire notion of wisdom is to no longer be subject to the delusion that thinks of experience of a continuity of self, a continuity of the solid phenomenal world. And so egolessness is established in the discovery that there in fact is no continuity. But that absence of continuity because there is still experience. We can't deny there's experience, but freeing ourselves from the solidification of self and the phenomenal world, there is then a continuous purity that abides as the basic ground. So having established selflessness is really essential to understanding this, so that we are not talking about continuity of the confusion, but we're talking about the continuity of this lack of solidity, this lack of continuity. That in itself constitutes the continuity that is really basic to the term Tantra. And this is then the purity that abides as Buddha nature. And this is then the vision basic to what Trungpa Rinpoche calls the Tantric world. So the Abhisheka has 5 parts, each of which is also called an Abhisheka. In the first part, which is also called the Abhisheka of the vase, the student is given water to drink from a vase on the shrine, called the Tsobum. The Tsobum is the principal Abhisheka vase and is used to empower the student. The text of the Abhisheka says, just as when the Buddha was born, the Devas bathed him, just so with pure divine water, we are empowered. So receiving water from the Tsobum is the first Abhisheka of the vase. Receiving the water from the Tsobum in the first Abhisheka of the vase symbolizes psychological cleansing as well as empowerment. Before ascending to the throne, the young prince or princess must bathe and put on fresh clothes. The 5 Abhishekas of the vase are connected with the 5 Buddha families. The first Abhisheka is connected with the Vajra family. The student is presented with a 5-pointed Vajra scepter, symbolizing his or her ability to transmute aggression into mirror-like wisdom. So I think many of you will be familiar with the receiving of Abhisheka, but it is a place where the teacher, having prepared him or herself as the deity, then summons the students, and the students are then empowered and essentially given then, you could say, the anointment as a Buddha. And so it's said in the tradition that in the old India, the teachers would actually put a student on a throne and give empowerment with the just like we saw when Queen Elizabeth was anointed as ruler of the realm. She was seated on the throne and then handed the orb and the scepter. So likewise, then the teacher, the guru, would anoint the student sitting on a throne and actually being handed these insignia. So that's where the student, the empowerment is then where the student is empowered with various implements. In the practical application, what happens in the general way of doing this is that the teacher, as the Vajra master, seated on a throne, is then essentially empowering the students with touching the students with these implements. During the ceremony, the teacher sits on a throne, but then very often comes down from the throne and goes through the through the assembly and touches each student individually with these particular implements. Trungpa Rinpoche continues, in the second Abhisheka of the vase, the crown Abhisheka, the student is presented with a crown inlaid with 5 jewels representing the wisdom of the 5 families. He is symbolically crowned as a confident and accomplished student worthy of taking his place in the mandala of Vajrayana. The crown Abhisheka is connected with the Ratna family. The student is also presented with a jewel, the symbol of the Ratna wisdom of equanimity. There is a sense of being enriched, a feeling of openness and generosity, and a sense of confidence that one is able to overcome any sense of threat or poverty. When this is done, then the teacher would go around to the students, or the students would come up to the teacher, and then the teacher would touch the student's forehead or sometimes in the hands with either with the actual implements or with little cards, beautifully drawn little paintings within representation of the Vajra with the jewel and so forth. Some of these, the implementations and so on, are quite elaborate, and that's where you necessarily need to have a card. Some of them are just the actual Vajra, which the teacher would have readily available, and then you would be touched with a Vajra. But other than that, then very often there's the use of these little paintings. They're called tsakli in Tibetan. So a tsakli is then a little card then with a beautiful painting of the particular implement, or sometimes a picture of the deity, mandala, syllables, and so on. In the third Abhishek of the vase, the Abhishek of the Vajra, the student is presented with a 9-pronged Vajra, scepter, or dorje. The Vajra is a symbol of indestructibility and of complete skillfulness in working with the phenomenal world. So in receiving the Vajra, the student is presented with the means to overcome obstacles and to propagate Vajra sanity. The Abhisheka of the Vajra is related to the Padma family. Although the Vajra is both a powerful scepter and a deadly weapon, its power comes from generating and extending compassion, warmth, and generosity. The student is also presented with a lotus, the symbol of the Padma family, signifying the ability to transmute the grasping quality of desire into discriminating awareness wisdom. So then the fourth Abhisheka, Trungpa says, the Abhisheka of the Ganta or bell is the fourth Abhisheka of the vase. Presenting the student with the Ganta signifies that he is not only concerned with personal realization, but is also willing to proclaim the teaching for the benefit of others. The piercing sound of the Ganta, so this is the bell, the piercing sound of the Ganta signifies that the Vajra proclamation of truth is unobstructed. The Abhisheka of the Ganta is connected with the Karma family. The student is presented with a sword, the symbol of the Karma family, signifying the wisdom of all accomplishing action, which conquers neurotic speed and jealousy. The final Abhisheka of the vase is the Abhisheka of name. In this Abhisheka, the Vajra master rings a Ganta with a Vajra attached to it above the student's head. So this is where you have the Ganta, and then tied with a little silk ribbon is then across the top there is the Vajra. So when the bell rings, the student is given a tantric name, but which is a secret name. This name is not publicized like an ordinary name, but when the practitioner needs to use his power to wake someone up, he says his own Vajra name, his secret name, as a reminder of Vajra nature. The giving of the secret name signifies the final act in the coronation of the tantric prince or princess. Because of merit accumulated through practice and devotion to the teacher, the student deserves to change his or her name from a common name to that of a would-be king or queen, a potential master of the mandala. The student is acknowledged as a future Tathagata. So these constitute then the, let me just read. Yeah, let's just read this. This is the last one about what we call the external beneficial empowerments. The Abhisheka of name is connected with the Buddha family. There is a sense of complete spaciousness and openness that comes when one takes one place in the Vajra Mandala. Having been coronated, the student is presented with a hook knife, which Vajrayogini holds in her right hand. At this point, the student is introduced to the chief deity of the mandala and to her Buddha-like quality, which is the wisdom of all-encompassing space. Although Vajrayogini is red in color, symbolizing her feminine quality of warmth and passion, her basic quality is definitely that of the Buddha family. So the Buddha family, as we saw here, is then the family that embodies spaciousness and openness. So I think we'll stop here. If there's some questions. So someone says, can we say openness to the Guru is a matter of cause and conditions and not based on simple wanting? Yeah, that's a very important point. The openness to the Guru is, oddly enough, yes, it is the cause and the condition for something being experienced that lies beyond ego. And it is really the cause and conditions that enable us to experience that which is beyond cause and conditions. And that is what the Guru embodies, the Dharmakaya, or the awakened condition that is unconditional. But for us to be sensitive to that, there has to be that openness. And that openness is based on deep respect, and not about wanting. Definitely there's no ambition, there's no agenda involved. There's a deep sense of awe and respect that connects with the egoless dimension of Buddha nature within ourselves. It comes from that place. Then there is here, yes, I find that when finally dissolving Vajrayana, there's a sense of having lifted the veil of confusion, having received the vast eagle-eye view from the lineage. Okay, that's good. That's nice. There's a little bit difference between Vajrayana as we practice it in the Nundro and then as the main deity itself, but we'll get to that. This presently we're talking about what we call the main Vajrayana practice. But of course, in the context of Guru Yoga, then we also engage Vajrayana as possessing actually the very same qualities that we're discussing here. So this is very relevant to those who are practicing Guru Yoga. Can you speak more about continuity? I have a sense the continuity comes from the all-ground quality of emptiness that is present, which allows everything to happen. Yes, there we need to distinguish between the primordial all-ground and then the all-ground of confusion, because very often we talk about alaya vijnana as the all-ground consciousness, and that's saying the ground of confusion. But the primordial all-ground is that which is free from anything that can be objectified, and as such also existing beyond time and space. It's not something that is pieced together through you could say moments that are perceived in a deluded sense as a continuity. So it's our insecurity that always wants to piece together a sense of my identity. I am this person, and I am justified in being who I am. And that kind of insecurity is us essentially continually sustaining a narrative that you could say weaves a sense of identity. And we're so addicted to that we don't even think we could be without that. But in the moment that we begin to cotton on to the fact that this is delusional and actually it doesn't have any reality, then meditation becomes the place where we begin to engage that connecting with reality that is egoless. That's where we're really willing to give up the familiar narrative and addiction to our ego story. And it's at that point where we begin to discover the unconditional quality, which is what we're talking about when we talk about the quality of emptiness, or the quality of Vajrayana and the foundations of Vajrayana. I have attended empowerments of other deities, but I haven't gotten the level of detail and understanding as they explained in this book. Yes, this is where Trungpa Rinpoche was so exceptional in his ability to communicate to the modern audience. And I think Tibetan Lamas themselves, they acknowledge that there's nobody like Trungpa Rinpoche in terms of communicating these aspects. So Trungpa Rinpoche is exceptional in this way. Yeah. Trungpa Rinpoche's books are being translated into Tibetan. But then again, remember Trungpa Rinpoche's explanations, they never depart from all the teachings that we have. The only thing, it never depart from the teachings that you find in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, in the Indian and the Tibetan instructions on how to, for example, provide empowerment and so on. He's always relating back to the actual material of the lineage, the material of the teaching. But he's knowing the audience so well, he knows what it takes to enable an appreciation in the mind of the students. So this is his exceptional skill. Any questions from the live studio audience?
A pivotal thing was devotion. Of devotion, like would you say the remedy would be the continual shamatha vipassana practice to try and strengthen or to open up that ability?
So the question is, to further devotion, what is helpful? Would shamatha vipassana practice be helpful? Yes, very much. The devotion is an organic development of the path. It's really development of confidence in oneself, and through confidence in oneself, there's also a confidence in the potential for enlightenment and appreciating how enlightenment actually, what it looks like. So with the foundations of the path, will take us to the organic, natural culmination of the path, which is Vajrayana. And so that's where any aspect that we're doing in terms of the path, such as shamatha vipassana practice or lojong practice, so on, all of that enables greater devotion. Yeah, essentially because devotion really comes from a place of deep trust. And so for us to trust, we need to first actually trust ourselves. So that's where meditation practice is very helpful in terms of achieving that. Is Vajrayogini empowerment particularly secret, or are all deities equally secret? For example, like Avalokiteshvara, which is more common. Well, yeah, that's where we sometimes have the notion that the outer tantras are less secret. Very often because in the outer tantras, the Buddha nature as embodied in deity is invoked as external to us. So in Avalokiteshvara practice, Chenrezig practice, often Chenrezig is invoked as deity external to ourselves, for example, seated on the crown of our heads or in front of us. So that's where the inner tantras, where you have empowerments like Vajrayogini empowerment, are seen as more secret in the sense that they operate more with the deity as being actually ourselves, that we truly are. The truth of ourselves, our deity. Whereas in the outer tantras, deity is more seen as external to ourselves. If Vajrayogini is Buddha family, which Buddha family is Chakrasamvara? I'm not sure actually. I'm not a Chakrasamvara sadhaka. So I wouldn't know. You'll have to ask a Chakrasamvara sadhaka. And again, they don't go around with hats and things. So you might, I don't know how you would find one, but they are out there. Trungpa Rinpoche actually trained his students so well, and so many have actually perfected Vajrayana practice, or certainly completed Vajrayana practice, and then proceeded to do Chakrasambhara practice. So they are out there, but which Buddha family Chakrasambhara is, I'm not sure. Sounds wonderful to graduate from the ordinary world. Do practitioners need to further graduate from the tantric world? Thank you. Well, we're just talking path. And of course, the intrinsic nature of what we think of the ordinary world is the Vajra world. So it's really just uncovering the nature of the phenomenal world. And that, of course, is done on the basis of something which is entirely intangible, which is prajna. And prajna is not something that we can grasp. So there's never a time when we are never a time when we're sort of holding on to some particular world. It's really just increasing degrees of prajna, in which the perceptions change from being deluded projection into seeing reality for what it actually is. This is such an important point, yeah? Sonsei Rinpoche says all Buddhist practice is placebo. So I guess even the most secret Vajrayana deity practice is also placebo. Oh yeah, of course. The path is just placebo, just like when we are being when there's whatever works. So the path itself is an illusion, because we already are Buddhas. So yes, to think that there's a sentient being is really just a delusional condition in which the Buddha comes along and says, you're a sentient being, but you need to attain enlightenment. That's, of course, this is what we call expedient means, that we actually think that they think that there is a Jakob. We think that there's a real world, that we think there is COVID. All of that is an illusion. But we are at the same time also humbly aware that this illusion seems very real to us. COVID seems very real to us. The stock market seems real. Jakob seems very real. And so as long as we are operating with holding this illusion as real, then we need something to deal with it. So this, like Padmasambhava says, I have taught a dreamlike teaching to dreamlike sentient beings living in a dreamlike world. So, but then again, we can then talk about particularly effective illusions, particularly effective placebos. I can see how Jakob and stock market is illusion. How is COVID an illusion? Because COVID is something which is COVID is again just conditions. Everything in the phenomenal world is conditions. The wind is conditioned. The phenomenal world in all its aspects, the 5 elements, the periodic table, everything is illusion. It's not as if we have some things that are illusion and others aren't. Anything that is an appearance which we label in a particular way, if we analyze it, we'll find that there's actually nothing there. That's really you could say the great lion's roar of the Buddhist teaching, is this understanding of lack of continuity, dependent arising, that everything exists on independency. So even COVID is something, if you talk to a biophysicist, they would tell you the DNA of COVID, or the sort of structure of COVID and so on. Yeah, the little prickly ball there, you know. So there's nothing which is not, there's nothing that has any intrinsic nature. This is the great, you could say, lion's roar of the Buddha's teaching, and particularly then in the Mahayana, a lot of emphasis in understanding how we cannot objectify or find intrinsically inherent truth in any given phenomenon, whether it's within the person or within the external. So, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. All right. If there are no further teachings, then we will conclude. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together.
Jakob?